The briefing room smelled like burnt coffee and paper that had been photocopied too many times. Captain Rachel Vance stood at the back, arms folded, watching the clock above the projector screen tick toward 0800. She was 26 years old. She'd been given command of Training Company Delta 3 weeks ago, and every morning since had started with the same knot in her stomach. Not fear exactly, but awareness. The sharp, bright awareness that everyone in this room was waiting for her to prove something, or to fail. The instructor cadre filed in one by one. Sergeant First Class Morrison, Staff Sergeant Chen, Sergeant Garcia, all older than her by at least a decade. All veterans of combat deployments she'd only read about in after-action reports. They took their seats with the casual, unhurried confidence of men who'd earned the right not to rush. When they looked at her, their faces stayed neutral. But she knew what they were thinking. She'd heard it in the hallways, in the mess, in the quiet spaces between orders. Too young, too green, too female. She didn't blame them, not really. In their world, rank came with gray hair and scars you didn't talk about. Command was something you aged into, like whiskey or grief. And here she was, West Point diploma still crisp, combat patch earned in a logistics convoy that never saw direct fire, standing at the front of a room full of men who'd survived things she could only imagine. She clicked the remote. The screen behind her lit up with the training schedule for the cycle. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was steady. She'd practiced that. "We've got 240 recruits arriving Friday, 12 weeks to turn them into soldiers. I know some of you have concerns about how I'll run this company. That's fair. I'm not here to pretend I know everything you know, but I am here to lead, and I will." The room was silent. Morrison leaned back in his chair, chewing a toothpick. Chen's face was a mask. Garcia looked at his notepad. She continued, "I'm going to rely on your experience. You've done this longer than I have, and I respect that. But I need you to understand something. When I make a decision, it's final. You can disagree with me in this room. You can push back. But once we walk out that door, we're one team, one standard. Are we clear?" A beat of silence. Then Morrison spoke. "Clear, ma'am." His tone was polite, empty. She nodded. "Good. Let's get to work." The first week of basic training was chaos by design. Recruits stumbled off buses with duffel bags and wide eyes, and the cadre descended like wolves. Rachel watched from the company headquarters window as Garcia screamed a private into the front, leaning rest, for the crime of looking at him wrong. She knew the game. Break them down, build them back, transform civilians into something harder. But by day 3, she started noticing patterns. Private First Class Jordan, 22 years old, skinny kid from Ohio, was being smoked 3 times a day for the same infraction, failing to keep his footlocker inspection ready. Rachel pulled his file. No prior disciplinary issues, no red flags, but Garcia had him in his crosshairs. On Thursday, she found Garcia in the drill pad after evening formation. "Sergeant Garcia," she said, "walk with me." He fell in beside her, hands clasped behind his back. They walked in silence for a moment, boots crunching gravel. "Private Jordan," she said. "What's the story?" Garcia didn't hesitate. "Kid's lazy, ma'am. Doesn't have the discipline. Needs correction." 3 times a day? If that's what it takes. She stopped walking, turned to face him. Or maybe he's just struggling. Maybe he needs instruction, not punishment. Garcia's jaw tightened. "With respect, ma'am, you weren't a drill sergeant. This is how it's done. And I'm telling you, it's not how we're doing it here." The silence between them sharpened into something colder. Garcia stared at her, and she could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. He was wondering how far he could push, how much authority she actually had. "Yes, ma'am," he said finally. She let him go, but she knew it wasn't over. By week 4, the fractures in the cadre were starting to show. Morrison was professional, but distant. Chen followed orders without comment, but never offered input. Garcia had stopped making eye contact entirely, and the recruits, they could feel it. You always could. Divisions at the top trickled down like poison in the water supply. Rachel started spending her nights in the office, poring over training manuals, old after-action reviews, anything that might give her leverage. She knew what they thought of her. Young, inexperienced, a diversity hire who checked the right boxes and skated into a position she hadn't earned. It didn't matter that she'd graduated near the top of her class. It didn't matter that she'd led a platoon through a year-long deployment. None of that counted here. Here, she was just the captain who didn't look like them. On a Tuesday night, she found Morrison in the cadre office, updating training logs. "Sergeant First Class," she said. "Got a minute?" He didn't look up. "Yes, ma'am." She pulled up a chair, sat across from him. Tell me the truth. What's the temperature in this company? Morrison set down his pen, met her eyes for the first time in weeks. You want the truth? That's why I'm asking. He leaned back, arms crossed. The cadre doesn't trust you. They think you're too young. They think you got this job because the Army needed a female commander to look good on paper. And they think the first time things go sideways, you're going to fold. It hit her like a punch. Not because it was surprising, but because hearing it out loud made it real. Do you think that? She asked. Morrison hesitated. I think you haven't been tested yet. She nodded slowly. Fair enough. So, what would it take? For what? For you to trust me. Morrison studied. Her. Then he said, show us you can lead when it's hard, not when everything's going to plan. The test came sooner than she expected. Week 6. A recruit named Private Daniels collapsed during a ruck march. Heat exhaustion. The medics rushed him to the hospital, and by the time Rachel got word, he was stable but out of the cycle. It should have been routine. Recruits dropped out all the time. But then Daniel's parents called. And then a congressman's office called. And then the battalion commander called Rachel into his office with a look that said this was about to become her problem. Captain Vance, Colonel Brennan said. He was 60, with a face like cracked leather and eyes that had seen every excuse the Army could produce. I've got a situation. Private Daniel's family is alleging negligence. They're saying the cadre pushed him too hard, that we ignored signs of distress. His father is friends with a congressman, and now I've got an IG investigation breathing down my neck. Rachel's stomach dropped. Sir, the cadre followed protocol. Daniels had water. He was monitored. We pulled him the moment he showed symptoms. I know that. You know that. But his parents don't care, and the congressman doesn't care. They want someone to blame. He leaned forward. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to conduct an internal review, interview your cadre, document everything. And if there's even a hint of negligence, you're going to bring me the person responsible. She felt the walls closing in. Sir, this is your company, Captain. Your responsibility. Handle it. She spent the next 72 hours interviewing every member of the cadre, reviewing medical logs, pulling radio transcripts. The more she dug, the clearer it became. No one had done anything wrong. Daniels had been cleared by medical. He'd had water. He'd been in the middle of the formation, not isolated. The cadre had responded immediately. But she also found something else. Garcia had been the one running the ruck, and 2 weeks earlier, he'd submitted a report recommending Daniels be dropped for lack of physical fitness. The company medic had overruled it. Daniels stayed in the cycle. It wasn't negligence, but it could be made to look like retaliation. On Friday, Rachel called Garcia into her office. He stood at attention, face impassive. Sergeant Garcia, she said, I've reviewed everything. You didn't do anything wrong. He blinked. Ma'am, you followed protocol. You did your job, but I need you to understand something. She paused, choosing her words carefully. There are people looking for someone to blame, and your report on Daniels, it gives them a narrative. It makes it look like you had it out for him. Garcia's face darkened. That's bullshit, ma'am. I wrote that report because he was a liability. I know, and I believe you, but perception matters, and right now, perception is working against us. She leaned forward. I'm not throwing you under the bus, but I need you to be prepared. If this goes to an investigation, they're going to ask questions, and I need to know you'll be straight with them. Garcia stared at her. Then he said, You really think I'd sabotage a recruit? No, but I think you're human, and I think this job is hard, and sometimes we make calls that look different in hindsight. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he said quietly, I didn't push him harder than anyone else. I just saw what I saw. I know, she said, and I'm going to make sure that gets heard. The investigation lasted 3 weeks. Rachel submitted her findings to the battalion commander, testified to the IG, and stood by her cadre. Every step of the way, she felt the weight of command like a stone on her chest. This was what Morrison had meant. The test wasn't about tactics or training schedules. It was about whether she'd protect her people when the fire came. In the end, the IG cleared the company. No negligence, no wrongdoing. Daniel's family dropped the complaint, and the congressman moved on to the next crisis. The day the report came down, Rachel walked into the cadre office. Morrison, Chen, and Garcia were sitting around the table, reviewing training schedules for the next cycle. She stood in the doorway. Just wanted to say thank you for being straight with me during the investigation. Morrison looked up. You could have hung Garcia out to dry, made this go away fast. Not how I operate. Garcia spoke without looking at her. I misjudged you, ma'am. She nodded. We're good, Sergeant. For the first time in 2 months, the room felt different. Not friendly exactly, but solid. like a foundation that had been tested and held. By week 10, the company was running like a machine. The recruits were sharper, tougher, more cohesive. The cadre had stopped questioning her every move. Morrison started offering suggestions in briefings. Chen smiled occasionally. Garcia still didn't talk much, but he'd stopped looking at her like she was an imposter. And then came graduation week. The ceremony was scheduled for Friday morning. Families flew in from across the country. The parade ground was prepped, the bleachers assembled. Rachel spent Thursday night reviewing her speech, the one she'd give to the recruits before they marched. She wanted to get it right, not for her, for them. But at 0600 on Friday, the battalion commander called her into his office. "Captain Vance," Colonel Brennan said, "I have news. The division commander is coming to the ceremony today." Rachel's heart skipped. "Sir, Major General Crawford. She wants to present the awards, and she asked to meet you specifically." Rachel tried to keep her face neutral. "Any particular reason, sir?" Brennan smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "She read the IG report. She was impressed with how you handled the investigation. Said it reminded her of her first command." He paused. "She's also the one who recommended you for this position. Thought you should know." The room tilted slightly. Rachel steadied herself against the desk. "Thank you, sir," she managed. The ceremony was perfect. 240 recruits, polished and proud, marching in formation across the parade ground while families cheered. Rachel stood at attention on the platform, flanked by her cadre. When the division commander arrived, the entire battalion snapped to attention. Major General Crawford was 52, with silver hair and a chest full of ribbons that told stories Rachel could only guess at. She reviewed the troops, shook hands with the graduating recruits, and then turned to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying across the field, "today we celebrate not just these soldiers, but the leaders who shaped them. Command is the hardest job in the Army. It requires courage, integrity, and the ability to stand alone when no one else will." She paused, her gaze sweeping the crowd. Captain Rachel Vance embodies those qualities. She took command of this company at 26 years old. She faced skepticism, scrutiny, and pressure that would have broken lesser leaders. And she did what leaders do. She stood her ground, protected her people, and delivered results. Rachel felt her throat tighten. Crawford continued. "When I recommended Captain Vance for this position, I knew she'd face resistance. I knew people would question her age, her experience, her right to lead. But I also knew something else, that the best leaders aren't the ones who fit the mold. They're the ones who break it." The applause started slowly, then built. Rachel glanced at her cadre. Morrison was clapping, his face unreadable. Chen nodded at her. Garcia met her eyes and gave a single, sharp nod. After the ceremony, Crawford pulled Rachel aside. "Captain," she said, "walk with me." They moved away from the crowd, toward the edge of the parade ground. "I read the IG report," Crawford said. "You could have sacrificed Garcia to make the problem go away. Most commanders would have." "He didn't deserve that, ma'am." "No, but it would have been easier." Crawford stopped, turned to face her. "That's why I chose you, because I knew you'd do the hard thing, not the convenient thing." Rachel didn't know what to say. Crawford smiled. "You know what the hardest part of being a young leader is, ma'am? Realizing that you don't need to be older or tougher or louder to lead. You just need to be you, and that's enough." 6 months later, Rachel stood in the same briefing room preparing for a new cycle. The cadre filed in, Morrison, Chen, Garcia, and 2 new instructors who'd just transferred in. They took their seats and Rachel clicked the remote. "Good morning," she said. "We've got 230 recruits arriving Monday, 12 weeks to turn them into soldiers." Morrison leaned forward. "What's the plan, ma'am?" She smiled. "Same as always. We train them right, we hold the standard, and we lead by example." Garcia nodded. "Roger that." The meeting ran smoothly, efficiently. When it ended, the cadre filed out, but Morrison lingered. "Ma'am," he said, "got a question." "Go ahead." "You ever doubt yourself, back at the beginning?" Rachel considered that. "Every day. But you didn't show it. Couldn't afford to." Morrison smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "You know what the cadre calls you now?" "I'm almost afraid to ask." "The captain. Not Captain Vance. Just the captain. Like there's only one that matters." She felt something warm and solid settle in her chest. "That's good enough for me." There's a photograph on Rachel's desk now. It's from that graduation ceremony. 240 recruits standing in formation, the cadre off to the side, and Major General Crawford presenting the company guidon to Rachel. She doesn't remember who took the picture, But she keeps it there as a reminder, not of the day she proved herself, but of the day she stopped needing to. Because leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, or the oldest, or the one with the most ribbons on your chest. It's about standing firm when the ground shifts, about protecting your people when it would be easier to let them fall, about doing the right thing even when no one's watching, especially when no one's watching. Rachel learned that the hard way, in a briefing room that smelled like burnt coffee, in an investigation that could have ended her career, in the quiet moments when she had to choose between what was easy and what was right. She was 26 when they gave her command. Too young, they said, too inexperienced, too different. But by the end, she wasn't too anything. She was just a leader. And that's the only rank that matters. Years later, when Rachel made major and took command of a battalion, she found herself giving advice to a young lieutenant who'd just been assigned to a company full of skeptical NCOs. The lieutenant was nervous, uncertain, asking all the questions Rachel had once asked herself. "Ma'am," the lieutenant said, "how did you get them to respect you?" Rachel thought about that for a long moment, about Morrison and Garcia and Chen, about the IG investigation and the sleepless nights and the weight of command pressing down like gravity. "I didn't," she said finally. "I earned it, one decision at a time, one hard call after another. And when it mattered most, I stood by my people." The lieutenant nodded, still uncertain. Rachel leaned forward. "Listen to me. They're going to doubt you. They're going to test you. They're going to wait for you to fail. And you know what? That's okay. Because leadership isn't about making them believe in you on day one. It's about proving over and over that you're worth following. What if I make a mistake? You will. Everyone does. But here's the secret." Rachel smiled. "The best leaders aren't the ones who never fall. They're the ones who get back up, and who bring their people with them when they do." The lieutenant left, looking slightly less terrified. Rachel watched her go and thought about that briefing room, all those years ago, about the knot in her stomach and the weight of all those eyes. She'd been so afraid of failing, but what she learned, what she hopes every young leader learns, is that failure isn't the enemy. Fear isn't the enemy. Giving up is. And she never did. On the wall of the battalion headquarters, there's a plaque with the names of every commander who's led Training Company Delta. Rachel's name is there now, sandwiched between colonels with 30 years of service. Her tenure was only 18 months, but it's marked with a small asterisk. The asterisk denotes commanders who served during exceptional circumstances. She never asked what that meant, but she knows. Because command is always exceptional. Every decision, every challenge, every moment when you have to choose between what's easy and what's right, those are the circumstances that define leadership. Rachel learned that at 26, standing in front of men who didn't believe in her, and she's been teaching it ever since. Not with speeches or slogans or motivational posters, but with action, with integrity, with the quiet, steady courage of doing the hard thing even when no one's watching. That's the legacy she left behind, not in the history books or after-action reports, but in the hearts of every soldier she trained, every NCO she earned the respect of, every young officer she mentored. Leadership isn't a rank. It's not a title or a position or a box on an org chart. It's a choice you make every single day, to stand when others sit, to speak when others are silent, to do what's right when it would be easier to do what's easy. Rachel Vance was too young for command, until she wasn't. And in the end, age had nothing to do with it. She was just a soldier who refused to quit. And that's the only qualification that ever mattered. The story doesn't end with medals or promotions or moments of glory. It ends the way most real stories do, quietly, in the ordinary moments when no one's watching. Rachel still gets emails sometimes, from recruits she trained, now sergeants and officers themselves, from NCOs who served under her, now leading companies of their own. They don't usually say much, just a line or two. "Ma'am, I'm facing a tough decision. What would you do?" "Captain, I remembered what you told us. Thought you'd want to know. Thank you for believing in me when no one else did." She answers everyone, not with advice or wisdom or grand pronouncements, just with honesty. With the same steady, quiet strength she learned in that briefing room all those years ago. Because leadership isn't about being perfect, it's about being present. And Rachel Vance has been present for every hard decision, every impossible choice, every moment when the easier path beckoned and she chose the harder one anyway. That's her story, not a tale of glory or conquest or triumph. Just the simple, powerful truth of a young officer who refused to let doubt define her, who stood her ground when the ground was shaking, who led not because she was the oldest or the loudest or the most experienced, but because when it mattered most, she was the one who stayed. And in the end, that's what valor looks like. Not a moment, not a medal, not a headline, just a choice, made over and over, to be worthy of the trust placed in you. Rachel Vance was too young for command, until the moment she proved she wasn't. And the proof wasn't in her age, or her rank, or her resume. It was in the lives she touched, the soldiers she shaped, the standard she held when it would have been easier to let it fall. That's the archive. That's the valor. That's the story worth remembering. Not because it's extraordinary, but because it's true.